I had known Joe for a good 10 years and spent many hours at his bar, the Landing Strip Lounge, drinking PBRs and lusting after the girls who worked for him. They came and went, but they all had one thing in common. They were hot. The current couple was no exception. Karen behind the bar and both waitresses, Tina and Cookie, made me want to rip off their clothes and possess them. I think this statement is not entirely accurate. If it was true of Karen and Tina, it wasn't quite true of Cookie. As I looked at her, my thoughts went something like this. Why don't I take someone like her as my wife instead of the cunt I'm married to? Not that she wasn't as beautiful as the other two, because she was and more. But if Karen and Tina were pretty damn beautiful, it was in the manner of, I'm beautiful and I know it. In other words, Karen and Tina would be buddies or friends with benefits, while Cookie would be in it for the long haul. But as much as I would have liked to give the meat to any of those three, it wasn't going to happen. It wouldn't happen because of the way I was built. I was one of those guys that really meant it when I said love, and that would be the case until death do us part. And at that moment, it couldn't have been worse. And I had recently found out that my wife was having fun with her boss, and apparently some of our mutual friends knew about it, although I had to wonder if they were really my friends. You'd think real friends would clue you in if they found out your wife was stabbing you in the back. I think they were more Claudia's friends than mine. They certainly weren't on my friends list or my Christmas card list anymore. And I was sitting there sipping my beer and thinking about my whore wife when Bobby Denton lowered himself onto the bar stool next to me. How you doing, Wally? Hanging in there, Bobby. How about you? Same old thing. Are you going to be here tomorrow night? Why? Tomorrow what? Open mic night. We've got some decent talent. Yeah, but I'll have to endure all your lame blonde jokes. I see your wife's face when you tell them and wonder why she hasn't cut your tongue out yet while you're sleeping. I don't sleep next to her. I thought that was odd, but before I could comment, he said, I need to talk to Joe about tomorrow, and got up and left. Karen came over and asked if I was ready for another PBR, and I told her no. I finished the one in front of me, then got up and headed home. When I arrived, Claudia already had dinner ready, and she greeted me with hugs and kisses, which I responded to. Claudia didn't know that I knew about her secret life with her boss, and I didn't want her to find out until I had all my affairs sorted out. Until I did, I still wanted to live a sex life, so I would have to keep what I knew to myself. When I found out what Claudia was up to, I went to a lawyer and found out the harsh truth about divorce in a no-fault state. In short, I would be totally screwed, and Claudia would walk away smiling. According to the lawyer, the only options were to just walk away without divorcing Claudia or letting her know where I went, or to smile, accept it, and live with it. Deal with it and live with it? Easy to say when it's not happening to you. But in the end, I decided to do just that. Live with it until I could get myself in a financial position where I could leave Claudia on my own terms. My terms were that I didn't give her shit and leave Thomas Billings broke and bleeding. Framing her boss would be the easiest thing in the world. All I had to do was let his wife know what he was up to, and if I got her right, she'd clip him under the knees and kick him to the curb. Sarah Billings was Barton Benton's only child, and he loved her dearly, but he was no fool. When his favorite daughter announced her intention to marry Thomas Billings, whom she had met at a company Christmas party, Benton had insisted on a prenuptial agreement that would prevent Billings from gaining control of Benton Industries if anything happened to Benton. Sarah was his sole heiress, and he wanted to make sure she retained control of the Benton fortune. How do I know all this? Claudia worked at Benton Industries as Billings' secretary and was connected to the gossip network. She would bring the gossip home, and it would become table talk at dinner. When Benton and his wife died in a plane crash, his only heiress Sarah found herself at the mercy of the company. She either didn't think she could handle it or she didn't want to handle it, so Thomas Billings, the purchasing manager, suddenly became president of Benton Industries. Sarah may not have wanted to run the company, but she wasn't a dumbass and kept the title of CEO and chairman of the board so she could keep an eye on things. All I had to do regarding Billings was to slip his wife a dime. Claudia followed Billings into the executive offices, but not as his secretary. She was promoted to personal assistant to the president. This promotion both pleased and displeased me at the same time. The extra money pleased me because we had just bought a new house, new furniture, and appliances. What wasn't happy was that the new job required her to travel around the country with Billings as he negotiated new contracts and such. Claudia was gone for 2 or 3 days, 2 or 3 times a month. I wanted my wife to be with me instead of flying all over the country, but she was happy in her new job, so I kept quiet and lived with it. That is, I lived with it until Claudia and I went dancing at the Elks Club. We had a great time drinking, dancing, and socializing with friends. About 2 hours after the party started, I needed to go to the bathroom. I was sitting in one of the stalls minding my own business when Brett and Chuck walked in. I knew it was them because I recognized their voices. When Chuck said, "Claudia looks really good today." "I know, and I'd like to get a piece of her." "I don't know if she can take you." "I thought maybe I could get her by threatening to tell Wally what she does on her trips with the boss." "I wouldn't if I were you. Wally is so fixated on that whore, he won't believe you. He might even kick your ass for talking bad about her." Chuck was right. I didn't believe him. I knew my Claudia. She loved me as much as I loved her. My Claudia would never, and I mean never, cheat on me. When I got out of the stall, I had half a mind to go to those two assholes and punch them in the face for what they said about my wife. The other half was saying, "Don't be a fool. You'll only cause a scene and embarrass Claudia." I let reason prevail, went back to the party, and tried to enjoy myself. When the party was over, we went home and got down to it. As we hugged afterwards, I realized that there was no way my wife would cheat on me. Next chapter. It's a funny thing about us humans. We have this thing called human nature, and one of the things human nature makes us do is prove something to ourselves. Somebody says, "You can't do that," and you have to prove that you can. Someone else says, "It's just not possible," and you have to prove that you can. Someone says, "Your wife is cheating on you," and you have to prove that she's not. And the easiest way to prove it? Show up where she is on one of her trips and see for yourself that it's a brazen lie. That's what I did. Billings and Claudia traveled to Houston, and Claudia, as usual, called me to let me know where they were staying. I was on the next flight to Houston. At the front desk, I asked if my wife had checked in, and after showing her ID, I told her she had checked in and was in room 306. I said she was in Houston to meet her cousin and asked if he had checked in. Yes, indeed, Cousin Thomas was staying in room 901. I was already headed for the house phone to call Claudia's room when I happened to glance at the elevators. I saw Claudia and Billings coming out of the elevator, holding hands. They were smiling at each other. They stopped and kissed as the elevator doors closed behind them, then headed for the hotel bar. I'd seen enough to realize what I'd overheard was true, and all I had to do was turn around, go home, and decide what to do. But then human nature intervened. It was telling me, "You need to find out more, Wally." I couldn't just follow them into the bar because they would notice me, so I needed to change my appearance enough to not attract their attention. I went into the hotel gift store. There was a lot of Houston Astro merchandise there, and I bought a baseball cap, a windbreaker, and a canvas bag with the team logo on it, as well as a pair of cheap sunglasses. I picked up a copy of People magazine and then headed to the public restroom. The suit and tie went in the bag. I whipped the lenses out of my horn-rimmed glasses, put on my cap and windbreaker, and headed to the bar. True, the disguise was a little thin and wouldn't stand up to close scrutiny, but I didn't expect Claudia or Billings to be scrutinizing anyone. They certainly hadn't expected to see me in Houston, and judging by the way they held hands and kissed in public, I highly doubted they were thinking about private investigators or detectives. I spotted them when I walked into the bar. They were sitting in a booth, drinks in front of them, and they were making out. I took a table so I could see them, ordered a drink, and then sat at the table, sipping my drink and pretending to read a magazine. They had 2 drinks each, played kissy face for a while, and after about half an hour, they got up and left the bar. They walked past me and didn't even look at me. I waited a minute, and then got up and followed them. I watched them walk hand in hand to the elevator, pressing the call button. They stepped into the elevator, the door closed, and the elevator went up. It didn't stop at the third floor, so Claudia could get off and go to her room. It reached the ninth, stopped for a minute, and then headed down. On the way down, he didn't stop on the third either. I looked up and headed for home. Next chapter. I met with the lawyer, got the bad news, and sprang into action to put an end to my and Claudia's relationship. When I got home from work on Wednesday, I didn't bother to stop by the house. Claudia called me and told me that the Billings had a meeting in Detroit in the morning, so they would fly there from Houston, but she would be home the next day. I walked into the landing strip for a beer or three and to see if Bobby was right when he told me they had some pretty decent talent assembled for the evening. I sat down on a bar stool, ordered my usual PBR, and made myself comfortable. As usual, Bobby started the evening off with a blonde joke. Two blondes were riding in an elevator. Long before they got to their floor, the elevator stopped and a very good-looking guy got in. He smiled at the blondes, held out his hand, and pressed the button for the next floor. Then he stood and admired the scenery as the elevator went up. When the door opened behind him, he smiled at the blondes, turned and walked out the door. As he turned to leave, the blondes saw the many flakes of dandruff on his back. The first blonde turned to the second blonde and said, "You." The second blonde replied, "It's okay. If I can get him home, I'll give him a head and shoulders." The first blonde looked at the second blonde and asked, "How do you do, shoulders?" Bobby elicited a friendly laugh from everyone except his wife. She just sat at her table in the back and threw dirty looks at him. He stepped forward and introduced the next aspiring stand-up comedian. The guy who came on stage looked around the crowd and said, "Two boys were arguing when a teacher walked into the room. The teacher asked them why they were arguing, and the first boy said, 'We found a $10 bill and decided to give it to the one who could tell the biggest lie.' 'You should be ashamed,' the teacher said. 'When I was your age, I didn't even know what a lie was.'" The two boys looked at each other, nodded, and handed the $10 to the teacher. He laughed politely and then continued, "A man goes to the doctor and says, 'Doctor, everywhere I touch, everything hurts.' The doctor asked him what he meant, and the man replied, 'When I touch my shoulder, it hurts. When I touch my knee, it hurts. And when I touch my forehead, it really hurts.'" The doctor shook his head understandingly and said, "I know exactly what the problem is. You broke your finger." He wasn't that funny, so I sipped my beer and scanned the crowd. For no reason, just people watching, when Cookie took the seat next to me. "Hey, handsome, buy a poor working girl a drink?" I got Karen's attention and pointed to Cookie. Karen nodded, and a moment later placed a screwdriver in front of Cookie. "And to what does Wally owe the pleasure of your company?" "Nothing, just curious." "Curious? Curious about what?" "About you?" "Me? You can't be serious." "Why not? You're a good-looking and nice guy." "Nice? Me?" "Yes, you are. You come here a lot, and I can tell by the way you look at Karen, Tina, and me that you like what you see. But you're not like a lot of others who come here. You keep your hands to yourself and don't make lewd or suggestive comments. The question is, why haven't you hit on any of us yet?" "You know why, Cookie? I'm married." "Why?" "Why what?" "Why are you married to that tramp? Surely you must know she's cheating on you." This caught me off guard, and Cookie caught the look on my face. "You didn't know? How could you not know? Everyone else knows." "How do you know?" She pointed her finger and said, "See that guy over there sitting in the corner booth with the redhead? That's my brother Rick. He works at Benton's. Everybody there knows about your wife and Billings. Rick came in here one day and saw you sitting here, and I was talking to you. He told me later that he felt sorry for you, and when I asked him why, he told me. What I can't understand is why, if everyone knows, no one bothered to let me know." "I don't know. Maybe for a variety of reasons." "Name a few." "There are so-called open marriages these days. There are those who like you too much to hurt you, and there are those who may be the other side of the coin, and don't like you enough to be happy about it happening to you. There may be people who like you but like your wife more. She finished with the screwdriver and said, "Break's over. You need to get your ass back to work." I looked at that ass as she left and wondered if she'd accept a date when I got rid of Claudia. On the bandstand, Bobby said that now it was time for those who wanted to try, and a voice from deep in the audience said, "I'd like to give it a try." Everyone in the audience, including Bobby, was surprised to see his blonde wife Brianna stand up and head toward the stage. Bobby looked stunned as he handed the microphone to his wife. "I know my douchebag husband likes to tell blonde jokes while looking right at me, but did you notice that Bobby is blonde too? Time for a little payback, dear hubby." An Irishman, a Mexican, and a blonde were doing construction work on scaffolding on the 20th floor of a building. They were having lunch, and the Irishman said, "Corned beef and cabbage. If I ever get corned beef and cabbage for lunch again, I'm going to jump off this building." The Mexican opened his lunchbox again and exclaimed, "Burritos again. If I get any more burritos, I'm going to jump too." The blonde man opened his lunch and said, "Bologna again. If I get another bologna sandwich, I'll jump too." The next day, the Irishman opened his lunch, saw corned beef and cabbage, and jumped to his death. The Mexican opened his lunch, saw the burrito, and jumped off the scaffold. The blonde man opened his lunch, saw the bologna again, and jumped to his death as well. At the funeral, the Irishman's wife wept. She said, "If I had known how much he was tired of corned beef and cabbage, I would never have given it to him again." The Mexican's wife also wept and said, "I could have given him tacos or enchiladas. I didn't realize he hated burritos so much." Everyone turned and looked at the blonde man's wife, and she said, "Don't look at me. He packed his own lunch." She laughed really hard and said, "What do you call a blonde man with an IQ of 35? Gifted." "Why don't blondes eat more M&M candy? They're hard to peel." Today, what's the difference between a blonde and government bonds? Bonds mature. And last, but by no means least, what do blondes and beer bottles have in common? They're both empty from the neck up. Brianna received a standing ovation from the women in the audience and their male companions who wanted to stay in favor of their ladies. Usually, when the comedian finished his act, Bobby would show up, take the microphone, and ask if anyone else wanted to try. If no one wanted to try, Bobby would tell another blonde joke or two, thank everyone for coming, and wish everyone a good night. That didn't happen this time. When Bobby still didn't come up, Brianna put the microphone on the floor and went back to the table she shared with her friends. Finally, Bobby came up to the bandstand again. Leaning over to pick up the microphone, he muttered, "Bitch," not realizing that the microphone was sensitive enough to pick it up. There was silence in the crowd, and when Bobby lifted the microphone to his mouth and said, "That's it for tonight, folks," there was none of the usual cheers and applause. I got up and went home. For the next 3 months, I pretended to be a loving husband to a woman who pretended to be a loving wife. I received a few commissions and one bonus check, which I cashed and then hid the money in a safe that Claudia didn't know about. It wasn't a very large sum, about $10,000, and it wasn't enough to feed me after my divorce when I had to give away half of everything I had. And then the gods smiled on me. Like so many other people, I bought lottery tickets, crossed my fingers, and started dreaming. I got lucky and bought the winning Powerball ticket. I had 4 numbers matched, there was a Powerball and a power play, so the ticket earned me $40,000 before taxes. In the end, when I cashed it in, it would have brought me about $28,200. It wouldn't make me rich, but it would be enough to start a new life after Claudia. I had 6 months to cash it in, so I needed to get the divorce finalized in time for it to be final before I got the money, or it would end up in the estate that we would split between us. The timing was right. Claudia had just gotten a promotion, and her salary was a little more than mine, so there would be no alimony. I would have to pay court costs, and there was no way around that unless I somehow got Claudia to file, and I didn't see that happening. The biggest problem, it seemed to me, was that Claudia could contest the divorce. In that case, she could drag the case out until the ticket had to be filed, and then it would become just another of our assets to be included in the 50-50 split. I had to find a way to make Claudia not want to fight. For all I knew, she wouldn't want to anyway, but I needed some way to make sure she didn't. The thing about no-fault divorces was that you could file a lawsuit citing infidelity, but it didn't matter. Even if I filed a claim of infidelity, Claudia could laugh at me and tell me that I had no proof, that it was all just my imagination, and we needed to go through marriage counseling to figure out where my insecurity came from and then address it. The thing was, I had no proof. Saying, "Come on," everyone knows wasn't proof, nor was seeing them holding hands and kissing. I needed hard audio and video evidence to assert this. Evidence that I could dump on the table in front of Claudia so she would realize that she had indeed been divorced and that she was wasting her time trying to fight for us to stay together. I didn't have that kind of proof, and after talking to a couple of private detective agencies, I realized that I couldn't afford to get the proof I needed if I went that route. As I sat in my doctor's waiting room, a woman wheeled an elderly man in a wheelchair into the office. When she approached the front desk, the man was sitting there alone and silent. Just when I thought I should make small talk with him, a little boy slid off his mother's lap and walked over to the wheelchair. Putting his hand on the old man's arm, he said, "I know how you feel. My mom makes me ride in the wheelchair too." The lady, whose name was Maria, had a good laugh at this and continued, "Working as a pediatric nurse, I have the difficult job of giving children immunizations. One day I went into the ward to give 4-year-old Lizzie a shot. When she saw the needle, she screamed, 'No, no, 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 no!' Her mom scolded her and said, 'Lizzie, that's not good behavior.' Then Lizzie screamed even louder, 'No, thank you, no, thank you.' This elicited polite laughter, and she ended by saying, 'I was on a bike ride with my 8-year-old granddaughter, Carolyn. I made a little wish.' 10 years later, I told her, 'You're going to want to be with your friends and not out walking, biking, and swimming with me like you do now.' Carolyn shrugged. 'In 10 years, you'll be too old to do all those things anyway.' It was open mic night at the Strip again, and I had a drink or two before heading to Claudia's house. She was out of town again. Cookie sat down on the stool next to me and handed me the usual, "buy a poor working girl a drink." She seemed to do this every time I came in. I smiled and waved at Karen, and she came over with Cookie's drink in her hand. We seemed to be getting into a familiar rut. "You're kind of quiet today, Wally. You don't seem like you're enjoying yourself." "I've got a lot on my mind, Cook." "About what, for instance?" I was just in the right mood to dump it all on her. "It doesn't seem like such a big deal to me. So what if you can't afford it? Just find someone who can afford it." "What?" "You said you don't think his wife knows, so go tell her. Have her set the dogs on those two cheaters. She'll catch them, divorce his ass, and call your wife hubby's girlfriend. The whole thing will go public and won't cost you a dime." I laughed, grabbed her, and kissed her. "Thank you, thank you, thank you," and kissed her again. She laughed and said, "Once you get rid of that bitch, we can do it again." "There's something to look forward to," I said, got up and left the bar. The next day I called Sarah Billings, reminded her who I was, and then asked if I could talk to her. She asked what about, and I said it was about a situation that concerned both of us and was too sensitive to discuss over the phone. She agreed to meet me for lunch at Tricacci's restaurant at noon. I arrived 10 minutes early, told Jared I was expecting a guest and described her, then took a booth at the back of the room. Mrs. Billings arrived at 12 sharp and, settling into the booth across from me, got right down to business. "What is this situation you want to talk about?" As I waited for her to arrive, I pondered how best to broach the subject and still had no clear idea until she sat down at the table. Her direct approach solved everything for me. I got straight to the point. "Your husband and my wife are having an affair. A rather lengthy one, I'm afraid." "You can't be serious." "I'm afraid I most certainly am." "Do you have any proof?" "Only what I have seen with my own eyes." "You actually saw them?" "Not the act itself, but I saw enough to convince myself." "I don't understand." You saw them, but you didn't see them. I explained how I found out what they were doing, how I went to Houston, and what I saw there. I admit it's not something the court would accept as evidence, but I have no doubt, not the slightest, about what happened after they got off the elevator on the ninth floor. I wouldn't have any doubt either if I'd seen it. What are you going to do? Divorce her as soon as I can. Thank you very much for letting me know that. I have two reasons for telling you what has been going on. The first is that I really thought you should know. And the second? Mostly for selfish reasons. The divorce will go much faster if Claudia doesn't fight it, but I think in the absence of hard evidence she'll contest it. The problem is that I don't have hard evidence. I've considered hiring a private investigator to get me that evidence, but I've come to the conclusion that there's no way I can afford it. But you can. I hope you'll want to get the evidence you need to get rid of this cheating asshole, and then as a token of your appreciation for me figuring you out, share that evidence with me. She gave me a thoughtful look, then said, and then, as revenge, you'll offer to entertain them and then let them know we'll rub their noses in it. At this, I laughed and said, be serious, Mrs. Billings. There's no way you can make anyone believe that a woman like you would get into bed with a guy like me. Not even to get back at her husband. Besides, if we do this and let them know, it'll undermine what I'm trying to accomplish. It'll give Claudia something she can use to countersue, and the divorce will end up dragging on. I want to get rid of this cheating woman as soon as possible. I think it's going to affect me too. Okay, we'll just chalk it up as a what could have been and move on with our lives. We exchanged cell phone numbers and parted ways. When I arrived, Claudia was home, and over dinner we talked about how our day had gone. We were both still playing the role of loving spouses, so we settled down on the couch and watched TV until bedtime, and then went to bed. I don't know if Claudia considered it lovemaking or not. Tuesday repeated Monday, and I expected Wednesday to repeat both Monday and Tuesday. But at noon on Wednesday, I got a call from Claudia saying that she and her boss needed to be in Detroit Thursday morning, so they were flying in at 4 p.m., and she wouldn't be home that evening. So I did what I used to do when Claudia was gone on Wednesdays and went into the landing strip. I was working late and, as a consequence, got there after open mic night had already started, so I missed the blonde Bobby jokes. Karen brought me a PBR, and I turned my attention to the bandstand. I looked over to the table where his wife usually sat and saw that she wasn't there. As far as I could remember, she never missed open mic nights, and I wondered if what had happened the previous Wednesday had something to do with that. The guy standing there was a regular, but I'd never seen him get up on stage before. The economy is so bad. CEOs are now playing miniature golf. Hot Wheels and Matchbox shares are trading higher than GM. McDonald's is selling a quarter of an owner. Parents in Beverly Hills have fired their nannies and are forced to learn their kids' names. A truckload of Americans hit Mexico. Motel 6 leaves no lights on. And finally, the mafia fires the judges. I laughed politely, and then I heard, buy the poor working man a drink, and turned to see Cookie had taken the stool next to me. It went on, and before I could say a word, Karen was already setting the drink in front of Cookie. I was surprised as hell when I grabbed her and kissed her hard. Shit. Why all of a sudden? I took your advice and contacted Sarah Billings. She didn't know her dear hubby was spreading pollen behind her back. I'm sure she's going to make inquiries about him, but I'm not sure she'll share what she finds out with me. It doesn't matter, though. Like you said, when she divorces him, it will become public and I can take advantage of that. And all I'll get for that advice is a kiss? What would you want instead? Ask me again when your divorce is final. I looked at her for a long moment, then said, count on it. She smiled, finished her drink, and went back to work. When I got home from work on Thursday, Claudia was home and dinner was almost ready. When I walked in, she asked, dinner first or dessert? Dinner first. If I start with dessert, we may never get to dinner, and it would be a shame to throw it away. I remember how you always pick dessert first. And I remember when you weren't a cheating whore, I thought, as my mouth said, I was much younger then, and didn't realize I needed food to keep my strength and stamina up. After dinner, we settled down on the couch and watched TV before heading to bed. The next week went by without traveling, but Claudia worked late and had to go out for a half day on Saturday. Sarah Billings called me on Tuesday and asked me to meet her for lunch at Tricacci's. When I arrived, she was already there and sitting in a booth on the back row. There was a large envelope on the table in front of her, and she slid it toward me as I sat down. This is everything you could ask for and more. You already know she's cheating on you, so if I were you, I wouldn't look at the discs. The images will probably stay in your memory. I know they're in my head. He's in for a big surprise when I deliver it. My investigator found out that Dear Thomas rented the apartment to use as a love nest. If he'd registered it in his own name, my investigator wouldn't have had the legal right to set up audio and video surveillance there. What he screwed up was that instead of putting it in his name, he billed the company. Since he billed the company and I am an employee of the company, I could authorize it, which I did. Let me guess. Tuesday and Thursday when Claudia told me she had to work late, and Saturday when she told me she had to go to work half a day. You guessed it, and Monday, Wednesday, and Friday are long lunches. I'm surprised they didn't do anything on Sunday to make the week perfect. It was our wedding anniversary on Sunday, and he couldn't get away. Now that you have proof, what are you going to do? I'm going to hire a lawyer and file for divorce. Use mine. He's already prepared all the paperwork. I plan on hubby getting a subpoena at work just before I demote him to the position he held before I married him. If we do it right, we can file at the same time. Give me your lawyer's number and I'll call him as soon as I get back to the office. That's what I thought, so I told him to expect your call. One more thing. Because of some of the things that were said after they finished their cases, I'm going to serve him with a protective order at the same time he gets the divorce papers. You might want to think about doing the same. Why? What was said? They talked about how it would be so much easier for them if you and I were no longer together. Tom said that if I died, the prenup would be null and void and he would be out. Your wife laughed and said that if you died, it would only bring her $100,000. $200,000 if your death was accidental, and then asked if he had any idea how they could do that, and he said it was something to think about. I could tell by the tone of their voices that they were just joking, but it gave me another reason to beat him up. My problem is that I don't think I could stand in front of a judge at a plea hearing and say, I fear for my life, without laughing. She was lying anyway. I only have $25,000 in life insurance, but I agree with you so I'd have something to hit her with. Do you have a vacation? 3 weeks. Why? I thought the day after I demote Tommy, I might appoint you as the new president of the company. Of course, it'll only be a sham, but think how he'll take it that the husband of the woman he's been having fun with is going to be his new boss. He'll be furious. You could even pretend to build a case against him to get him fired. Why don't you just fire him instead of demoting him? He'll probably sue the company for wrongful dismissal. What kind of unfair dismissal? The apartment he's paying for with company money is misappropriation of company funds for personal use. His affair with a married female employee under his direct supervision opens the company up to a harassment suit if he gets tired of Claudia and kicks her to the curb, and she gets angry enough to try to get back at him. All this plus the fact that he's cheating on you shows that he can't be trusted, and you can't have your company run by a man who won't rust. Take all of this to your attorney and see what he says. The minus side of that argument is that you'll have to keep Claudia, even though you probably want to tear her hair out by the roots. Why would I want to do that? Keep her, I mean. Because of the harassment. All she has to do is say your husband told her he'd fire her and give her a bad reference if she didn't agree. You'll keep her, give her a small raise, and promote her to the shittiest job in the place. And after a while, she'll get sick of the shitty job and quit. I looked at my watch. I need to get back to work. Thank you for this, I said, picked up the envelope in front of me and stood up. What about my idea of making you president for a few weeks? It won't work if you fire him and he's not present for it. Maybe I just want to keep you around to get to know you better. We can talk about that when we have more time. You have my number? Call me. As I drove to work, I thought about what she said about wanting to get to know me better. I would call her, but only to discuss the divorce and the timing of when our estranged spouses would be suing. How do you get to know each other? No. She was steak, lobster, and champagne, and I was Diet Coke, burger, and fries. It just wouldn't work. Back at the office, I called the lawyer whose number she had given me and found that he was fully expecting my call. We talked, and he told me that all the paperwork was ready, and he would just need to copy it and put my details where Sarah's were. He gave me a price, and I gave him my credit card number. He said the papers would be ready to sign the next day, and I arranged to meet him at 4 o'clock to sign the papers. When I went to bed, Claudia kissed me and murmured, "I love you," and fell asleep. I lay staring at the ceiling and wondered if she really meant it, and if she did, why she was cheating on me. Those thoughts never left me as I dozed off. At 4 o'clock, I entered the office of Dewey, Cheatham and Howe and was ushered into Stanley Howe's office. I was surprised to see Sarah there, and it turned out that signing my papers was only part of the reason I was there. It was also a strategy planning session. The issue was when to file for spouses who are contemplating divorce. Because of my lottery ticket deadline, I wanted to do it as early as yesterday, but Sarah wanted to wait for the right time. In her opinion, the right time was when the couple was on one of their trips. She imagined them stepping hand in hand out of the elevator at the hotel where they were staying. I kept pushing for immediate service, and finally Sarah asked, "Why is it so important that you can't wait a week or two?" I opened my mouth to tell her that, and just as quickly closed it. I wasn't a lawyer and didn't know the law, and I could be wrong, but it could be that hiding assets was against some law, and my lawyer wouldn't let me do it. "It's just important to me," is all I said. The meeting ended with the case being adjourned while Sarah figured out when Shithead and Claudia would be hitting the road again. And there was a coffee shop on the first floor of the building, and as we were getting off the elevator, Sarah asked me to have a cup of coffee with her. We got our coffees and sat down at a table. Sarah took a sip of her coffee and then said, "Okay, Wally, spill it out." "Spill what?" "It was obvious that you were going to tell us why you were in such a hurry to get to your wife's service, but then suddenly decided not to. So tell us what's going on." I told her about the ticket, the ransom date, and why I had suddenly decided not to report it to Howe. She laughed and said, "No problem, Wally. Just give me the ticket. I'll buy it from you and cash it." "I can't do that." "Why not? Think about why you approached me in the first place. You couldn't afford to hire a private investigator, and I can. You knew I could because I'm rich. I'm still rich, Wally, and what good is wealth if you can't use it to get what you want? I want Tommy to be served the way I described in Howe's office. To get what I want, I will use my wealth. Besides, you'll be in the winnings if I buy your ticket." "How's that?" "I'll give you 40 in cash, and you can put it in a safe or in your mattress, and you won't pay any state or federal taxes on it." "But you'll end up paying taxes." "So? I'll give the ticket to my accountant, and by the time the taxes are paid, it will have disappeared into the general population and won't amount to a dime. Once again, Wally, I'm just using my wealth to get what I want." I only shrugged my shoulders and agreed. I don't know how she did it, but 2 days later she gave me $40,000 in cash and I put it in my safety deposit box. Sarah got what she wanted and everything happened just as she had envisioned. Claudia and Shithead stepped off the elevator in the lobby of the Atlanta Marriott Hotel, smiling and holding hands. The smiles disappeared when a pretty blonde woman chewing gum walked up to them and handed them each an envelope, then informed them that they had been served. Claudia looked at the envelope in her hand and cried. Shithead looked at his face and his face turned ugly. He tried to rip the envelope in half but couldn't because it was too thick. He threw it on the floor and kicked it with his foot, and it slid across the floor into the elevator just as the door closed. Claudia collapsed into one of the chairs in the lobby and sobbed into her hands. Shithead looked at her in disgust and left for the bar. After a few minutes, Claudia pulled her cell phone out of her purse and spent the next 10 minutes trying to call. When there was no answer, she finally gave up, threw the phone on the floor, and started crying again. Believe it or not, When I turned off the CD player and pulled out the disc, I felt sad at the sight of the video Sarah had made. I loved Claudia and still have feelings for her. Seeing her suffer made me sad. But my feelings for her weren't strong enough to survive what she was doing to that bastard. I remembered that morning when she'd been served, remembered all the calls she'd made that I'd ignored. I wondered what she could say that would make a difference. When she got home, she found that I had changed the locks and couldn't get in. I let her ring the doorbell and banged on it for 15 minutes before I opened the door. Said, "You didn't read all the papers in the envelope you were handed? Have you not read the order of protection that requires you to stay at least 500 feet away from me, my home, my place of employment, and any other place I may be? Leave now before I call the police and they come and arrest you." "You can't do that to me, Wally. This is my house, too." "Then the judge who signed the order doesn't think so, Claudia. Now get out before I call the police." "Damn it, Wally, you have to let me talk to you. You have to let me explain." "No, Claudia. That incident with the cotton you gave me said it all." And I slammed the door in her face. Of course, that was a lie. She hadn't given me the social disease, but she didn't know that. And I hoped the thought that she had would torment her until she took the test herself. 5 minutes later, she was still banging on the door, and I called the police. A car arrived with 2 officers. I showed them my ID, and they told Claudia she had to leave. She tried to argue with them until they finally told her to leave and stay away or they would arrest her. She threw a disapproving look at the house and then left. I waited 2 days and then called her and told her I would meet her at Barney's Tavern and let her talk. We met and I got the crap I expected. She did it for us. She did it because the money would help pay off our debts, and once that was done, she planned to leave. She only loved me, and with Billings it was just sex, and it wasn't great. I was much better than that. We were able to get through it because we loved each other. Just give her a chance. I listened to her and then gave my opinion. Just sign the papers and send them to Claudia. You sign, and all the videos of you and that bastard doing business will never get to family and friends. You'll never have your own internet site, and they'll never show up on any of the thousands of amateur sites I could send copies to. Just subscribe and let it be Claudia. After watching the video of you and your lover, those scenes are imprinted in my mind, and they will never go away as long as you're around to remind me. It's over between us, Claudia. Accept that and move on with your life. Damn it, Wally, I don't want a divorce. I love you. Then you never should have started cheating on me. Now you're used and spoiled goods, and I want nothing more to do with you. Consider yourself lucky. At least you still have a job, which is more than can be said for a guy lover. I stood up and left her sitting, and smiled, knowing that when she got ready to leave, she'd find out I hadn't paid the check, and she'd stay with it. Next chapter. Sarah called me 3 days later and asked me to meet her for lunch. We met at Tricacci's restaurant, and after Mandy took our order, she filled me in on what happened after Shitcrat was served. Apparently, he never found the envelope he threw in the elevator, so he never got to read the protective order. When he got home, he couldn't get in because Sarah had changed the locks. He started pounding on the front door, kicking it with his feet and yelling to Sarah, "Get your ass over here and open the damn door!" He apparently didn't notice a car parked outside with Avery Security Service written on the door. 2 men got out of the car, approached him, and politely asked him to leave. He told them to die and get off his property. One of the men told Shithead that they had been hired to guard the property and to see that he obeyed a security order instructing him to stay 500 feet away from the house and Mrs. Billings. Shithead again berated them and again told them to get off his property, and when they didn't move from the spot, shoved one of them. When he regained consciousness after being tasered, he found that the 2 guards had been replaced by 2 police officers, and he was handcuffed. When he left the prison and went to work, he was stopped by 2 guards who told him that they had been ordered not to let him enter the building beyond the lobby. One of the guards picked up the phone and made a call, and 3 minutes later, the human resources manager showed up and informed the asshole that he was fired for embezzling company funds and violating the morals section of the company's policy and procedure manual. "You can't do that to me, asshole. You seem to forget that I run this place. He ranted and raged, and when he wouldn't leave, the HR person called the police. They arrived, and the asshole went to jail for violating a protective order for the second time. He didn't know Sarah was in the building, so when he was brought before the judge, the same one as the first time, he was able to fight off the charge because there was no way he could have known Sarah was there. She didn't have an office in the building, and she wasn't one of the regular employees, so he had no reason to think she might be there. The judge agreed and let him go free. But he was humiliated to be led out of the building in handcuffs in front of the people over whom he had once been supervisor. One of them was Claudia. Sarah, as chairman of the board, took over as president and informed Claudia that she didn't need a personal assistant and that Claudia was to work in the secretariat until another position could be found for her. She would keep her salary and all other benefits she had acquired as personal assistant. And then Sarah told her that she really wanted to fire Claudia, and the only reason she didn't was because I talked her out of it. Sarah told me that Claudia seemed stunned that Sarah even knew me, let alone had any contact with me. A day later, she called Claudia into her office and told her that she was being promoted to office manager and sent to a plant that was 30 miles away. She then told Claudia that she was getting a 10% pay raise so that she would make as much as I did, maybe even a little more, so that I wouldn't have to pay child support. At the end of the meeting, she told Claudia that once our divorces were final, she intended to gouge my eyes out in gratitude for my informing her that her husband was cheating on her. Sarah told me that Claudia left the meeting with a shocked look and shaking her head. And Claudia must have believed me when I told her what might happen with the videotapes I had because she didn't fight the divorce. It was a standard 50-50 arrangement, and all it cost me, besides Claudia, was the loss of the house. It had to be sold and the proceeds divided. We hadn't lived in it that long, so there wasn't much equity, but I got enough to put a down payment on an apartment and move in. Claudia rented an apartment near her new job. She still calls me at least once a week and asks me to give her another chance. I always reply, "Thanks for the offer, but you're welcome." The day after the divorce was final, Sarah called me and asked when the divorce was final. Yesterday. My final one is today. Do you have any plans for tomorrow? No, I don't have any plans. You do now. Pick me up at 6 outside my office. We'll celebrate freedom with dinner, drinks, and dancing. I hadn't entertained since the last time I'd been with Claudia, and Sarah was a very attractive woman, so I said, 6 is a yes. See you then, she said, and broke the connection. Sarah looked gorgeous when I picked her up at 6. I asked you to pick me up at work because there are some people there who have stayed on good terms with Tommy, and I think they'll let him know that you and I are together. The same people will probably let your ex know as well. The conversation over dinner was general in nature, Sarah telling me how things were going since she took over the company. She loved it and regretted not stepping in when her father passed away. I told her about how my work was going and about the apartment I bought when the house was sold. After dinner, we went to the Purple Onion for drinks and dancing. It was a damn good thing the next day was Saturday, and I didn't have to work, so we came home and got down to it. On Saturday, Sarah and I got up late and went to Pegasus for brunch, and then went to my place and did it again Friday night, and then back to her place again on Sunday. I couldn't spend Sunday night at Sarah's because I had to go home and get the clothes I had to wear to work. It also didn't hurt that I was able to get some rest. Next chapter. For the next 2 months, Sarah and I saw each other 2 or 3 times a week and on weekends. Then, on a Friday night when we were spending the weekend at my house, she told me that this weekend would be our last. I've loved every minute we've spent together, but I don't love you. And to be honest, you don't love me either. We're good friends with great benefits, but that's all there is and will be. I really wish it could go on, but something has happened that makes it impossible. Is it something I did? I guess in a way you could say yes. Would you care to explain it to me? You divorced your wife, so yes, we can say it's something you did. That's clear as mud. Turns out your ex is an above-average office manager, and my office manager at corporate headquarters filed a notice. Her husband has been transferred to his company's Los Angeles office. I'm going to move your ex from where she is now to my office, and it would be too awkward to work with her while I'm playing with you, especially since I have no doubt she knows about us. That was one of the reasons we started, right? To thumb our noses at our exes? Isn't that a reason to beat everyone up? She messed up my life when we were married, and now she's messing up my life when we're not married. I guess I'd better make the most of our last 3 days. And I picked her up in my arms and carried her into the bedroom. Sunday, we tearfully said goodbye, and Monday morning I embarked on the next phase of my life as a single guy looking for love. Next chapter. I spent most of Monday and Tuesday in a mild despondency over the loss of Sarah, but by Wednesday I was in a decent mood. Because of all the evenings spent with Sarah, I hadn't been to Landing Strip in a month and a half. No sooner had I put my ass down on the bar stool than Karen showed up with my PBR and sat down on the bar in front of me. "Welcome back, stranger." "Good to be back, lady. Would I be lucky enough to get you to agree to go out with me tonight?" "You know I don't date clients. So go on a date with me and I'll stop coming here." "What? And lose the tips you leave? No way, Wally, no way. But play your cards right, and there's a young lady here who might see her way clear to give you a chance." And she removed herself to take care of another customer. I had already half finished my beer when Bobby took the seat next to me. "Where have you been, Wally? Was the talent so bad that it chased you away?" "Not at all. Just had better things to do." "I can understand that. I saw you with more important things to do at the Alhambra a week or so ago. It's good to see you again." He got up to have a word with the other attendees and then went up to the stage, welcomed everyone to another open mic night, and began with the expected blonde joke. A blonde woman buys a thermos. She brings it to work to show her friends. One of her friends, also blonde, asks, "What does it do?" The first blonde replies, "It keeps warm things warm and cold things cold." The friend asks, "What do you have in it right now?" "A cup of coffee and 2 ice creams." Then the first aspiring comedian was brought out. He turned out to be the guy from the day shift counter at the Mavericks where I filled up in the mornings. My mom lives in Newark, and I haven't seen her in a couple years, but we talk on the phone at least once a week. Yesterday we talked, and as I hung up the phone, I thought about my mom and came up with 10 reasons I owe my mom. My mom taught me the value of a job well done. If you're going to kill each other, do it outside. I just finished cleaning. Mom taught me religion. You better pray it comes out of the carpet. My mom taught me time travel. If you don't straighten up, I'll send you to the middle of next week. My mom taught me logic. Because I said so, that's why. My mom taught me foresight. Make sure you wear clean underwear in case you have an accident. Mom taught me irony. Keep crying and I'll give you an excuse to cry. Mom taught me the science of osmosis. Shut your mouth and eat your dinner. Mommy taught me acrobatics. Look at that dirt on your neck. Mom taught me stamina. You're going to sit there until all that spinach is gone. But most of all, Mom taught me patience. Just wait until your dad gets home. I had to laugh at that because I remembered hearing most of those words from my mom myself, and judging by the laughter, it must have struck a chord with everyone in the crowd as well. In the middle of the performance, someone sat down on the stool next to me, and I heard the familiar, "Buy the poor working girl a drink?" As usual, the words were no sooner out of her mouth than Karen was already placing a drink on the bar in front of her. "Remember what I said about Wally's cards," she said to me before leaving to take care of another customer. "What did she mean?" Cookie asked. "I think she meant that since I'm divorced, I should ask you out." "Well? What? Are you going to do that?" "What are my chances of you saying yes?" "I don't know until you ask." "Would you like to have dinner with me on your next night off?" "No." "I guess that answers my question about the odds." "No, it doesn't." "You're losing me, girl. I'm getting some mixed messages." "No, I can't have dinner with you on my next day off, but I'm free the second day." "And when will that be?" "Tuesday." "Okay, let me try again. Would you like to have dinner with me next Tuesday?" "Yes, I would." She picked up a bar napkin, wrote on it, and held it out to me. Give me a call so we can set it up. I gotta go. And she got up and went back to work. Since I had just finished my third mug of beer, I decided it was time for me to go. I was at Cookie's door at 6 on Tuesday, and as I pressed the doorbell, I pondered where the next chapter of my life would take me. The end. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. So subscribe to my channel and watch the next video.